What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and this one is some early thoughts ahead of game week 30. So I'm going to go through some key players that we need to talk about, some notes from the weekend, and some quick thoughts on my own team as well. So let's get into it. So let's start with Joao Pedro. He's had nearly 200,000 transfers in so far this week. No other player has crossed 100k yet. So Joao Pedro is super popular, not surprising after a 19-pointer against Aston Villa. And I've got to hold my hands up and say I've got it massively wrong with him. Not just about selling him recently, but also at the start of the season when he came in, I did not see him as the number 9 that Chelsea needed. And he's done really well. Like, he's sitting at 0.58 goals per 90 minutes. And sometimes when you see that, you think, well, there's probably some overperformance there. Not really. He sat at 0.57 expected goals per 90. He's just doing really well. And I also think because his competition is Liam Delap, he's going to have to play a lot of minutes because I just don't know if Delap is the one. And especially isn't the one right now. He's got a lot of development to go through. So the minutes look quite good. The goal threat is there. Is he a good option? I think I have to say yes and just admit defeat at this point. I know I said recently I would have sold him before Arsenal away. I still kind of stand by that. Like, these things can happen, right? No one predicted him to get 3 goals, 1 assist in one match, especially against Villa away. So if you sold Joao Pedro to Thiago or Ekitike before Joao Pedro played Arsenal away, yes, you've been punished by that. But I still don't think it was a terrible move. I hold my hands up and say it was literally wrong. But without the hindsight, I think it was okay. The question is, what do you do with him now? Because everything else that's happened is in the past. If you've got him, I'm guessing you'll keeping him. Newcastle at home, Everton away, not too bad. Obviously, he's doing really well at the moment. You're just going to ride that wave. And I did say last week, once you're past that Arsenal game, if you held on to him, the conversation is a little bit different. I do think I would have still sold him last week because I'm an idiot. But yeah, if you've still got him at this point, Newcastle at home, Everton away, absolutely fine. The key question is as well, I suppose, do you now have to rush to bring him in, as lots of people are doing? I would say no. What's the chances he goes and gets another 3 goals, 1 assist against Newcastle or Everton away? Chances are he'll get fewer returns than that in both of those games combined. Not saying he won't get anything, but I don't think there's this mad rush to bring him in. If you sold Joao Pedro to Ekitike or Thiago in particular recently, you should just hold them. Thiago's nailed on penalties, Wolves at home, Leeds at home next to. Ekitike gets to play Spurs at home this week, and Spurs are terrible, and they don't have Van de Ven now. So I'm looking at it from last week's point of view, thinking, wow, if Haaland had been ruled out, I would have gone Ekitike and Salah. Now I'd have Ekitike and Salah against Spurs at home. That looks quite good. So I don't think you need to reverse those moves. Absolutely not. The only reason to look at Joao Pedro is if you need to sell another forward, and then it's a choice between like him, Thiago, Ekitike, who do you bring in? And if you're on a 3-forward setup, let's say you've got Thiago, Ekitike, and Krupi, and you've got the money to upgrade to Joao Pedro, and you want to go 3-4-3, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, then you can look at Joao Pedro. I still think if I was making... This is probably going to be a mistake, right? But I still think this week, if I was picking someone to bring in between Thiago and Joao Pedro, I would take the guy on penalties with Wolves at home, Leeds away next. Not that they're super easy fixtures, but I think I'd rather play both those games than Newcastle at home, Everton away, and I would take the penalties. Ekitike's a closer call, because I don't necessarily think that Ekitike's minutes are miles better than Joao Pedro, and from a goal threat perspective, they're both quite similar. I do think the Spurs at home game would probably make me lean towards Ekitike, but I don't think it's a no-brainer or anything like that. So, yes, Joao Pedro done extremely well recently, and yes, he's even continued to do well once the good fixtures were out of the way. But I just don't... I probably won't be buying him this week, put it that way, unless I get an injury or unless I want to sell Haaland. Like, if you want to sell Haaland to put money elsewhere, then of course, look at Joao Pedro. But for most people, you probably don't need him. And he's probably not going to go and get 4 attacking returns against Newcastle. So don't panic too much. He's a good pick. If you want to keep him, fair. If you want to buy him, that's also fair. But there's just not this mad rush is all I would say. But who knows? After the weekend, I might get into next week thinking that ownership is going up. He is doing really well. But that's just not really how I play. So I doubt that's going to happen. I doubt I'm going to bring in Joao Pedro. I'll just take the misery. So speaking of players I'm probably not going to bring in this week, let's talk about Antoine, the rank killer Semenyo. 7 points for him in game week 29. He's been super consistent for most of this season, and that has carried on into playing for Man City. And importantly, the minutes have been great as well, which probably is part of the reason he's the most transferred in midfielder going into game week 30. Should you be buying him though? In my opinion, on current information, absolutely not. As it stands, he's got West Ham away, no fixture in 31, then Chelsea away 32 and Arsenal at home in 33. That's a pretty terrible fixture run overall. Yes, West Ham away this week is not bad, but unless you've got a ton of transfers, are you really bringing him in just to take him back out in 31? Now, there will be some people out there that don't have many players blanking in 31. Maybe they can just put Semenyo on the bench for that week, but then you're coming back to Chelsea away. It's not even that good of a fixture. Then it's Arsenal in 33. So unless you're free hitting in 31, I just think you ignore Semenyo on current info. Now, for everyone watching this, I would say don't make any early transfers this week because the FA Cup this weekend could be quite important. If Man City lose to Newcastle in the FA Cup, there is a chance, it's not a guarantee, but a chance that Man City versus Crystal Palace will go back into game week 31. All of a sudden, Semenyo would then have West Ham away, Palace at home, and would look like a better pick. And also, Haaland would then play in 31 as well, so you'd have less players blanking. Maybe some of you are holding like Gay, O'Reilly, etc. If O'Reilly's back fit, all of a sudden 31 looks a bit more manageable. Semenyo looks like a better transfer in. But if Man City beat Newcastle in the FA Cup, that game can't go back into game week 31. And like I said, it's West Ham away, blank, Chelsea away, Arsenal at home. Just doesn't look that good. Now, even if you were dead ending into 32, because you're wildcarding that week, you still don't have a fixture in 31. So yes, he's been great. And yes, of course, your rank goes down when he scores. But for most people, it does not make sense to buy Semenyo now. The closer you get to 31, the worse of a pick he is. So if you've got him, obviously you're keeping hold of him. There's no need to sell him before West Ham away. But I just don't think anyone should be buying. Also, West Ham away is right in between the two Champions League games against Real Madrid. And what we don't know about Semenyo yet is what his minutes are going to be like when he starts playing other matches as well, like Champions League. Now, I suspect he'll be rested in the FA Cup this weekend and probably not start against Newcastle. But then he could play Real Madrid, West Ham away, then Real Madrid again. Is he going to play 90 minutes in all three of those games? He might do. He might just be an absolute machine when it comes to minutes, but we don't quite yet know. So that's just another reason to not buy him if you don't own, in my opinion. This could be another Joao Pedro situation. He could go and get a hat-trick and an assist against West Ham, but I'm willing to bet it's not all that likely that happens. So if you've got him, hold still. If you don't, wait and see what happens in the FA Cup at least. And if Man City win against Newcastle, I think Semenyo is a no-go for now. Later on, we can come back to it, but for now, I'd ignore. So Morgan Rogers is almost the reverse of Semenyo in that if you're an owner, you're probably very frustrated right now, but the closer you get to game week 31, the more difficult it is to justify selling him, because in game week 30, it's Man United away, which is not a completely awful fixture, but not amazing either, I get that. But then once that's out the way, you've got West Ham at home. And I know Villa are not playing that well right now. They're missing the likes of McGinn, Tielemans, etc. in midfield. And obviously West Ham are having a bit of a resurgence. If you ignore the Liverpool game, they have done quite well recently. But on paper, West Ham at home, especially in a blank game week where some people don't have a fixture, that is not bad whatsoever. So I would probably lean towards keeping him for most people. Like if you've already made the decision to hold him through the Chelsea game, now it's just Man United away, West Ham at home, before some of you will dead end into game week 32 wildcard. And even if you don't, by the way, it's then Forest away in 32, Sunderland at home in 33. So it doesn't even look that bad. So I almost feel like if you've come this far, you'd probably just keep him. But it is your team. And if you prefer to get rid of him because he's just that frustrating, I get it. But I think you have to be able to manage game week 31, preferably with free transfers. If you sell Rodgers now and that causes you to take a hit in game week 31, that's just not ideal, in my opinion. So I'm not sitting here saying you can't sell him. For me, I'm not really looking at buying him at all. So I don't think he's an amazing pick or anything like that. But if I had him in my team already, I probably would lean more towards keeping him. Like when you get to game week 31, if people do dead end into 32 and they need a new midfielder, people will look at him. I will probably go towards Gordon instead because of the penalties. But in isolation, 1 week only, Rodgers is not bad for game week 31, especially when he plays 90 minutes every single week. So it's kind of the same conversation with him as it has been for the last few game weeks. If you want to get rid of him and you can manage game week 31, go for it. For everyone else, I feel like you've just got to stick it out and just hope that it gets a bit better because of that fixture in 31. So who's the forward with the most transfers out this week? Yes, of course, it's Erling Haaland. Another really disappointing performance for him in game week 29, a 2-pointer against Forest. And if you look at his recent points totals, they have just been really bad for quite a while. And I know this isn't necessarily going under the radar. We've spoken about him before, but when you go through it, it is just terrible, considering he cost 14.6 million. So a 2-pointer against Forest. At least he was back, by the way. So he's in the 11. He played 90 minutes. We assume he's fit going forward. Missed the Leeds game in 28. 6 against Newcastle. 5 against Fulham. 11 against Liverpool. And by the way, that double-digit return in game week 25 is his only one since game week 17. So in game week 17, he got 16 points against West Ham, who he's about to play. Although West Ham may be playing a little bit better than they were. They're playing a little bit better right now than they were back then. And a 13-pointer against Crystal Palace in 16. Since then, so this is his scores from game week 18. 2-2-2, 6-2, 1-5, 11-5, 6-0-2. Just not good enough for that kind of price that he costs. The problem is, as is the problem we've had most of the season, where do you spend the money? Because every time I mention Salah as a differential punt, it comes with a lot of negativity. People just don't want to buy him. Saka has a blank in 31, so the timing of getting him doesn't feel right. Cole Palmer, maybe. Newcastle at home, Everton away. I don't hate that, but I don't think there's a rush to go and get him either. So if you're not selling Haaland for the money, what are you selling him for? Like, you could just sell him to Joao Pedro or Thiago or Ekitike, but in isolation, I think in any given game week, especially when Haaland doesn't have a bad fixture like this week, I think Haaland's the one I'd rather have. Like, if I was free hitting in game week 30 and you said you can have one forward and one forward only, I would just choose Haaland. So in isolation, he still, stacks up really well against those other players. It's just whether you want the money. Now, I'm not even sitting here saying you can't sell him, because obviously you can. If Man City beat Newcastle in the FA Cup this weekend, like Semenyo, it's West Ham away, blank, Chelsea away, next 3. You could take a punt. But for this week only, Haaland's quite a good option. I will say, though, there is a little bit of temptation to make the move I spoke about last week. Go from Haaland to another forward and then buy Salah. If I'd done that last week, I'd have more points because I would have captained Salah. I'd have Salah and Ekitike against Spurs at home this week is a big differential. Not that Ekitike's ownership is low, by the way, but Salah is a differential up against Haaland. And then a blank in 31 anyway for City. So it is still quite tempting. And also, that West Ham away game is in between the 2 Real Madrid games. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that Haaland won't start, because he probably will. But could his minutes be reduced a little bit, depending on what happens in the first leg against Real Madrid? Potentially. Now, Man City are obviously in the title race. So they don't want to, they're not going to mass rotate against West Ham, I don't think. But there could be some rotation and some reduced minutes. This is why I was kind of keen, if Haaland was ruled out last week, to make that Salah switch. So I think you can justify doing it this week if you wanted to sell Haaland, but for most people, it's not going to be your best move. You're going to have other issues to deal with. And Haaland is probably going to start against West Ham. It's not a terrible fixture. And for that reason, he's a good pick this week. So if you're brave enough to sell him this week, again, I don't hate it. Move to Joao Pedro, whichever forward you want, right? Thiago, Ekitike, and then go and buy Palmer or Salah, who both play in 31, especially if you've still got your wild card. If you don't have your wild card, maybe you just hold Haaland through. Because if Man City do beat Newcastle in the FA Cup, and I know I've said that a lot in this video already, then their chances of doubling in 33 goes up. So if you've used your wild card, you probably keep him for West Ham, keep him through the blank, play him for Chelsea, and then hope that he has a double in 33. But for those of us that are dead ending, there is more reason to look to potentially sell him. But it doesn't mean you have to. And obviously, if Newcastle beat Man City in the FA Cup, hold your horses, because then Haaland might have Palace at home in 31. So just to go through some notes from the weekend, obviously Harry Wilson wasn't in the squad at all for Fulham. They do have an FA Cup match this weekend, so Marco Silva has already held a press conference. He said about Wilson, he was on the grass this morning, I think that was on Thursday, doing individual work, which is not ideal. If you ask me now for Sunday, he is unlikely to be in contention, but we have sessions on Friday and Saturday and we will make a decision. So Wilson completely missed out game week 29, still a doubt going into the FA Cup match. The good news is game week 30 is obviously next weekend. So we'll get more updates about Wilson from Marco Silva. I wouldn't panic just yet. And ideally, even if he misses 30, as long as he's going to be back for 31, he's probably worth holding on to because it's Burnley at home in that week. So don't buy Wilson right now, but don't rush to sell him either. Joachim Andersen was also benched. So I've got to say, again, hold my hands up. I got that wrong. I thought if he was in the squad, there was almost no chance that he would get benched. Now, we don't actually know why he was benched. A lot of Fulham fans have said that Diop just played really well against Spurs, so maybe he was rewarded by keeping his place. Marco Silva hasn't said anything about it as far as I can see. Obviously, Anderson missed out through illness, so maybe he wasn't just quite fit enough to start. I don't know. I'd be very surprised if Anderson doesn't start against Forest. But again, if you can bench him this week, Forest away is okay, but not an amazing fixture anyway, not for a defender. So you could bench him, see if he gets back into the team, and if he does, it's then Burnley at home in 31. So let's see what happens there. For Chelsea, Sanchez was benched. Rosenior said, the way I work with goalkeepers, I don't have an outright number one. He did say that weeks ago, or maybe even a month or two ago as well. So he's obviously stood by his word. He said that Jorgensen had played well in training, essentially. Maybe it was just the mistakes that Sanchez was making in the matches. This one's really tricky about what to do, because goalkeeper transfers are just rubbish. So you never want to make them. But if you're sat there without a goalkeeper, I don't think you can take the risk of going into game week 30 without one. So in that case, you've probably got to sell Sanchez. I will say, if you've got Sanchez and Dubravka, I would probably just let it run, especially if you're wildcarding in 32. Because Dubravka's got Bournemouth at home this week, then Fulham away in 31. It's not amazing, but I'd rather just play him than make a transfer on Sanchez, probably. So let's wait and see. But the thing is, I say wait and see. Sanchez will probably just play in the FA Cup, and then you'll be in no better position to know what to do. I think if you've not got a goalkeeper, I would make a move. If you've got Dubravka, I would just let it play out for now. Because maybe Sanchez gets back in. You never know. Yeah, I just don't think we're going to get any more info before 30. That's what's so annoying about it. For Liverpool, they have a FA Cup match this weekend. Slot said on Verts he could be available for a few minutes in the best scenario. So he is still struggling for fitness. But if he does get some minutes in the FA Cup, the hope would then be that he would play against Spurs at home in game week 30. That's a pretty nice fixture. If you've held on to him, I would definitely not rush to sell him. Wait and see what Slot says ahead of that game. Wait and see what happens in the FA Cup. If Verts is a doubt again, I think you just got to get rid. That's just too long to be waiting. For Arsenal, Saliba missed out in game week 29. Arteta said that he turned his ankle against Chelsea in game week 28. He managed to finish the game somehow, but he was too sore to play today. So if you're a Saliba owner, there's every chance he'll be back for Everton at home in game week 30. That's a pretty good fixture. I would hold on to him for now, but obviously don't buy him. So for Sunderland, their goalkeeper, Royce, is going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. So if you own him and he was your only playing goalkeeper, you are going to have to make a move, a bit like with Sanchez. If I was buying a goalkeeper this week, I'd probably go for Kelleher. I think he kind of fits in whether you're dead ending into 32 or not. So it's Wolves at home, Leeds away next 2. But if you need to play through a little bit longer, the fixtures are quite good. Again, ideally, you just don't make a goalkeeper move, especially if you're going to wildcard soon. So if you've got Royce and Dubravka, you could just play Dubravka for the next 2. But Kelleher is probably where I would look in the kind of short to medium term. For Newcastle, Gordon played number 9 again. Obviously, we know he's first choice penalty taker as well. I think he's looking like an okay pick right now. I still don't think I would rush in to buy him before playing Chelsea, though. And it's Chelsea away, right? So I don't think I would go there this week, but I'm definitely looking at him, as a dead-end option into game week 31 because it's Sunderland at home and his minutes just look quite good right now. So we'll see what happens. They do have Champions League soon against Barcelona, so the minutes might get reduced again. I'm not saying Gordon is a perfect pick, but in game week 31, I would consider him. I wouldn't be buying him this week. Then it's Palace away in 32, by the way. So if you've still got your wild card left and you get to 32 and it's not actually a great choice to use it, it's not that bad to play him against Palace away. I know I've already mentioned this, but just again to reiterate, this weekend we've got the FA Cup 5th round being played. The quarter-final draw is on Monday. Hold on to transfers if you can. The chances are the results in most FA Cup matches are not massively going to change your transfer strategy or chip strategy after the weekend. But the Man City-Newcastle game in particular is huge. Because if City lose, you know already, right, if you've watched the rest of the video, what's going to happen. But also, we'll start to get some confirmed fixtures in game week 34. So Brentford, for example, are playing this weekend in the FA Cup 5th round. If they lose, they'll then play in game week 34 against Man United. So there won't be a blank. That'll be a confirmed fixture, which also means those two teams won't double. So that starts letting us piece together kind of chip strategy a little bit more. It's not going to provide all the answers because who definitely blanks in 34 is dependent on who gets through to the FA Cup semi-finals. But obviously, once you know who's through to the quarters and what teams they're playing, you can start to hazard a guess at who's going to blank. Like if Arsenal get through to the quarterfinals, they've got a really easy fixture, then you know they're likely to blank in 34, then possibly double in 33. If Newcastle and Arsenal get through to the quarterfinals and then draw against each other, well, they play each other in 34, so you know 100% that fixture's off. So there is going to be a bit more info. It's not going to provide all the answers, but it will make things a little bit more interesting. And then for Man City, Nico O'Reilly was not in the squad. I tried to find some information about him based on what Pep would have said for why he missed out. All I could really find was what he said before the game. So if you're a Nico O'Reilly owner, I wouldn't panic just yet. He might be back this weekend, but we're going to have to wait for more information. So I'm just going to run through some very early thoughts for my own team going into game week 30. I've got 3 free transfers and 2.1 million in the bank. So things are not looking too bad, although they do look a little bit worse than they did yesterday, because now Munoz is yellow flagged. So for those of you that didn't see, he went off injured about 12 minutes into the Spurs game with a shoulder problem. And Glasner said after the game that his arm is in a sling, so he's a major doubt for Leeds at home. So that's a bit disappointing. Lost him for the Spurs game, which looked good on paper, and now probably losing him for Leeds at home. So not great, but it is what it is. And yes, I know I had a lot of luck in game week 29. Elliot Anderson and Senesi off the bench for like 23 points. So I'm not complaining, but it's still not great to lose a player like that for Leeds at home. So I might have to transfer him out this week. I will say buying a defender this week specifically is quite difficult because there's not really anybody that I want. Like Brentford defenders, I'm just not that keen on going anywhere near them just because of the centre-back situation. And I've already got Senesi. I don't really want to double up with Hill when he plays Man United at home in game week 31. Like Fernandes and Mbeumo against Senesi and Hill just sounds a bit rubbish. So as it stands, if Munoz is out, I think my plan would probably be to hope Harry Wilson's back and play 3-5-2, or maybe even just play Joachim Andersen and just sell Munoz to someone like Hall or Chow in game week 31 when Newcastle play Sunderland at home. I have had a quick look already, by the way. If I downgraded Munoz to someone 4.8 million or below, so let's just put in Hill for now, even though it won't be him. I can afford to do Rice up to Palmer. So Palmer's got Newcastle at home, Everton away, big differential, and obviously Rice blanks in 31. But because Declan Rice has got Everton at home this week, there's not a massive need to sell him. And also, and I know my approach has been quite cautious this season, because game week 31 is so important and we won't have a bench, I want to get the players correct that week. So I kind of really want to roll to 4 free transfers. So I get to game week 31, I've got the most up-to-date information ahead of the blank and can just get the correct players in. So ideally, I want to roll, and I think if Wilson is fit, that's probably what I would do. Just play 3-5-2, because the rest of the team looks okay. Raya and Gabriel Everton at home is great. Van Dijk against Spurs at home. Senesi Burnley away. Fernandes and Mbeumo have got Villa at home. I mean, Mbeumo is getting subbed a little bit earlier than the likes of Cunha in recent matches, but I'm not particularly worried about that. He was also on a yellow card in the Newcastle game as well. Rice Everton at home, as I've said. Elliot Anderson against Fulham at home. What an absolute hero. Thiago against Wolves at home. And Haaland, currently my captain against West Ham away. I know I seem to have this conversation every week, but I am quite tempted just to go for Fernandes, just because Haaland's right in between the Real Madrid games against West Ham away. But then I think to myself, if I'm not going to captain him, do I just sell him? So, look, I've got 3 free transfers. I'm not... Could I do Haaland and Rice to Ekitike and Salah? Could I still do that and just play Wilson or Joachim Andersen instead of Munoz? My worry would be if Wilson's still a doubt and the fact that Anderson didn't play last game, can I really do that? So all of a sudden it feels very greedy. Sell Rice against Everton at home instead of Munoz, who's flagged, when I've got 2 slight doubts as it stands against Fulham. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that Haaland move. I'm less sure about it than last week. That's the case, absolutely. But it is still on my mind. But I do wonder if it's just chasing last week's points, because it's not like Salah was great. So I don't know. The team looks quite good. I'd like to roll to 4 free transfers, and I'm pretty sure that's what I'll do if Wilson plays. And then I can just decide what to do with the team in 31. So let's wait for more information. Maybe Munoz will be fine. He did try to play on. So it looked really bad initially. Looked like he was going to go straight off. He tried to play on, but as soon as he went to strike the ball, he signaled to the bench that he cannot play. So it's obviously causing him some pain. I don't know if it was dislocated. Presumably not. I don't think you play on with a dislocated shoulder. So I don't know if it was an impact thing or what. We'll have to wait and see what Glasner says. The good news is Glasner is fairly open with injury news. So hopefully he'll tell us exactly what's going on. So 3 free transfers, 2.1. Yes, I would like to roll because most of the team looks pretty good this week. And Game Week 31 is so important. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. That's probably it from me until next week now. I want to get those FA Cup games out of the way before we make any more decisions. So yeah, expect some videos Monday or Tuesday. Enjoy your weekend off from FPL, and I'll catch you again soon.